Hello, I'm Abby Campbell, and today I'm going to present about prompt number 6 for class, focusing on what type of artifact or how would I teach a learning theory to others. I really was intentional with this project because Kolb's and really all the other theories related to experiential learning and reflection and action stood out to me the most throughout this semester. But I realized I can make it so much more intentional for my students if I also teach them the basics of the value of reflection in their learning and help them to articulate what that means and also to help them use it as a learning tool throughout the year. I'm excited to try this out with a group of students and to see how it can have a positive impact on their metacognitive thinking and their reflection throughout the school year. So I'm going to walk through what this lesson would be and how I would use it with my students. So, of course, the answer is who is Kolb? And when I think of Kolbs, I always think of, for some reason, outer space. It just sounds very Star Trek-y, so that's why I chose this theme. But having students start out by answering a question at the start of class. What is a life lesson you have learned? How did you learn this lesson? And being prepared to share. I think students will automatically think of a lot of our common life lessons, like don't touch a hot stove. We learn that right away as a kid because we experience it. And so having students really get to the point of, yeah, I gained some wisdom or I learned this because I had this experience. And that's a really good scaffolding or starting point for the rest of the lesson. So this is some background information about the lesson. So I set up an experience where students will actually live out Kolb's theory by going through a minute to win it game, and then each of the components of Kolb's they will go through as they make a strategy for how they can do better at this game. So when I thought of experiences that I could replicate in my classroom in one class period, I instantly thought of games. And then I tried to think of something that would work well with groups. And so I remember watching Minute to Win It. We've done Minute to Win It games before at FFA meetings. And so taking this familiar experience and having students go through it in a new way, to me made perfect sense to incorporate Kolb's to help them teach that theory. So students will complete the experience and then I'm going to anchor them physically to the four corners of my classroom. So each part of Kolb's they will go through, they'll move with their groups to that area of my classroom so that they have both a physical but also a visual anchor of how this theory works. Okay, so for my students, this is a slide that they will see. Let's have an experience. They're going to watch the clip. It's linked here to the Minute to Win It game where they're using a spaghetti noodle, and each student is holding it into the spaghetti noodle as it is through the lid of a pop can to carry an empty pop can from one platform to another. So in this instance, from one desk to another. And so they have to work as a team to try to move as many pop cans as possible using their spaghetti through that tab. Of course, we say pop because we're in Ohio, but any empty soda can will work, and it'll be easy for me to get those at school. So not providing students with a lot of context, just kind of throwing them into this experience, just like how life throws us into many different experiences. So immediately after, the students will move to one corner of the room and they'll have probably 2 minutes to discuss with their partner what happened, what worked well, what didn't work well. So these surface level questions that if you have ever read The Processing Pinnacle, it's one of my favorite books, but how we move students through processing is how we get them to make their own meaning or facilitate their own answer on their learning. And so the same thing's true when we're teaching them about a learning theory. So starting out with these surface level questions. And so this directly, of course, relates to Kolb's because this is the reflection component. After students go through that reflection component, they're then going to analyze whatever that concrete experience was. So in this instance, the Pop Tab Spaghetti Challenge. And so they'll move to another corner of my room and I'll have paper and I'll have markers there. And the students will list out with their partner a T-chart. So what action did they do? And what happened as a result. So we're taking from our surface level processing to so what? So how can we think on our experience and really identify what actions caused what things to happen. After they make that chart, then they'll move to the third corner, and that's where they will come up with a strategy. So they're now from their reflection to their analysis, they're now in the strategic part where they're starting to come up with how they can improve their game. What are they going to do differently this next time? So the students, of course, will act on that strategy and have the chance to have one more concrete experience, the exact same one. After they experience it the second time, there'll be a quick debrief on, did it actually go better for you this time? Why do you think it did? Some of those basic processing questions. And then pause because, wait, that was Kolb's. And so helping students realize that each of the four steps that we just went through are representative of Kolb's theory of experiential learning. I really liked the words that were chosen for this representation or this model because they are easier for students to grasp. And so having students walk through each of the four corners of the room where we'll talk about what they experienced, what they reflected on, what they act or they thought about, so analyzed when they created that chart, and then how they're going to act on it. So what was their plan to improve for the next time? And physically moving with students to each of these corners as we go through them together. So of course, providing them some background knowledge of Kolb's. So several websites within our textbook, Kolb defined learning as the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. One of my favorite quotes is, action without reflection is a waste of time. And I think that fits perfectly into Kolb's because if we are not reflecting on our actions, we're not making meaning out of them, we're not learning from them, we're not able to apply that to gain wisdom and experience. And so if students are able to reflect on their experiences, they're metacognitively going to gain so much more out of our classroom. And so just some quick background knowledge that I would share with the students, that this model, I mean, in the terms of research is pretty old, 1984. And of course, reflection is not new. We learned about it with Dewey, we learned about it with Piaget, we learned about it with Schoen, we learned about it with Vieira. So all these different theorists really focus on how reflection in or during an experience or after an experience can improve our ability to learn. So one thing that I always like to share with students is that how people got into the position that they are. I think those career stories are really important because we always see the end product. We don't see the struggles along the way. And so Kolb wasn't sure what he wanted to do. He wanted, in fact, to be a minister for a long time. He was interested in psychology, of course, but he wasn't very happy with what he did. A lot of rat studies, a lot of behavioral studies, similar to ones we discussed in class, before eventually going to Harvard and MIT. And then again, something that I think is powerful to share with students is he overcame bullying at a young age because he loved learning and he remembered powerful experiences in the classroom. And I think this is a good point in the presentation where I would ask students, what is the most impactful or powerful thing that you remember from a class? I can think of one. I know we all can. There's always a teacher or a moment or a lesson that stood out to us. And our goal as educators is to have lots of those moments with our students. And so chances are those moments all came back to an experience. And so helping students again anchor to that concept. So this is the part that I was most excited to include and really got me thinking. So Kolb's fits into agricultural education in so many ways. So we have our three circles. Ag education, of course, is a career tech course. And so students have classroom instruction. They have their career tech student organization, which is FFA. And then they have a supervised agricultural experience, which is a project that takes place outside of the classroom. So taking an animal to the fair, maybe you have a job somewhere, maybe you're doing a science fair research project, maybe you are growing a garden, etc. Anything that's taking place outside of the class. So Kolb's fits into our ag experience in each of these three circles. And so ask students, okay, what is a time in FFA where you saw yourself living out Kolb's? Okay, I went to the soils contest. I did my best. but then they went over the answers, so I was able to analyze why I put the answer that I did. And then I thought about that and how I could improve it for next time, what I needed to work on. And then I went back to the next competition and I was able to do a lot better. There's Kolb's. In the Supervised Agricultural Experience Circle, I took an animal to the fair and I had a lot of problems with ringworm. And because of that, I had to research what to do about ringworm, how to treat it, how to prevent it. And I've made a plan for this next year on how, when I take my project, I'm going to follow some of those biosecurity procedures and so that I don't have to deal with ringworm for a second year in a row. And so having students come up with these experiences, and it doesn't even have to be in ag education because this would be taught to my freshman students. Really, anytime where we've tried something and we've learned from it, we've failed forward is kind of the culture that I want to create. So having students make that connection. Kolb's is ag education. It is experiential learning. It is that hands-on learning and why it's so powerful. So some real-time statistics that I would bring in. This is a screenshot from a website that we use to track our FFA chapter, and it shows our enrollment of students. So in classroom, our SAE participation, and our FFA participation. And so each of these three components require experiential learning in order to be successful. And so there's some data here that I would be excited to share with my students and to show them how all three of our components are very close in numbers, so we have a well-rounded chapter. So to kind of add icing to the cake, I've heard and I've used the 70-20-10 model before. We had a teacher professional development where we discussed it, and I really latched onto it because if we say that 70% of how we learn is on-the-job experience, well, that just adds validity to Kolb's theory. 70% of how we learn in general is from experiential learning. It's from having times where we try something and we fail. So Kolb's. And so with students, I can tell them that you're in this ag class, 70% of the time it's going to happen through Kolb's model. And we may not always reach the destination that we want, but we're going to have that learning mechanism that we can apply to either a same experience or a new experience, which is really the second part of Kolb's theory. So how can we apply something to a new experience that we've gained from a prior one? And then if 20% is from social or informal learning with our classmates, how can we reflect as a group to talk about that and really take it one step further? I also use this to tell them that what I teach you is only 10% of how you learn. So what you do in the shop and how you solve your own problems is where you're going to make the most difference in your education. And so reflecting with my students, we had that experience we lived out. We talked about Kolb's. We talked about the model itself. But asking students, how do you think you learn best? How do you think we'll learn in ag class? And how can Kolb's help us learn to really solidify the value of Kolb's in our classroom instruction? And so in general, this lesson is something that would take about a class period. I have 40-minute class periods with my students, and it would teach them Kolb's theory, and it's something that I want to keep as a visual reminder. So I would love to, and I plan on making a poster of Kolb's theory to hang in my classroom, and I can use it after we have an experience like we just welded. Point to that first part, the concrete experience, and then point to that reflection and tell students this is where we're at in our learning. And so after we reflect, what do we do next in order to be able to gain some wisdom from this experience in ag class? So this is my prompt number 6, and I'm really excited to share with my students the value of Kolb's because I think they're going to find a lot more value in my class and also feel like they have a lot of autonomy and ownership in how they learn and why we learn the way that we do. Thank you.